Are you an avatar? I'm an avatar. And finding out that I'm an avatar and what that means was the most revolutionary and most important thing that's happened to me on my spiritual path. I've said before, I've been on the spiritual path for a long time. I've studied many different spiritual teachings, but the teachings about the avatars is definitely the most revolutionary I've come across. And the reason for it is that these teachings, they explain so much about Earth and why things are the way they are on Earth. But more importantly, they also gave me a whole new way to look at my own psychology and the psychology I have in relation to Earth. And that has been very important for me to help resolve this, so I can be free of these reactionary patterns I've had for a long time. And I met many other spiritual people who also found that this was revolutionary teaching that was very important for them. So I think if you're spiritually interested, it would be to your advantage to at least look into this and see if this resonates with you. So let's start with the word itself, avatar. We of course have the popular movies Avatar, we have the concept in computer gaming of an avatar, but the word actually comes from spiritual literature. It comes from Sanskrit, and it literally translated means descent. And in Hinduism they use it kind of to explain the descent of a deity. But I use it in a more democratic way, we might say, to explain that there are certain life streams, certain souls that didn't come from Earth originally. We have descended here. We didn't have to descend here. We chose to descend here in order to have a positive impact on a planet. And there are literally tens of thousands of avatars in embodiment right now. So it's not some exclusive thing that only refers to some perfected being or some deity. It's very much something that applies to a lot of spiritual people today. So, are you an avatar? Well, consider these questions. Did you ever feel like you don't really belong here on Earth? Did you ever feel that you must have come from somewhere else that was better than Earth? Did you ever look at Earth and look at some of these things that are happening? War, torture, poverty, and think, why is this going on? This shouldn't be going on. This can't be right. This can't be natural. And did you ever feel that I'm not really here because I want to be on Earth, because I want to enjoy doing what you can do on Earth? I'm here to do some work. I'm here to have a positive impact and leave the planet in a better place. And then I want to get out of here. Now, avatars can have different things we focus on. So I met many avatars who have a certain area of society they focus on and feel this should not be happening, this really needs to be improved. So it can be very individual for each one of us, but we all have this sense that there's something that shouldn't be taking place on Earth, and something needs to be done about it, and often we have the sense that we need to do something about it. And I'll explain why that is, why we have this sense. So if you answered yes to some or maybe even all of these questions, then you can benefit from looking into this more closely. Because if you find out that you are an avatar, it will give you a lot of tools for dealing with your attitude to Earth. And you will probably find out why you never really felt you fit in, not only on Earth, but in your particular society, maybe in your family, your culture, why you're always an outsider, why you always really couldn't commit to life on Earth the way other people do, because there was nothing here that really appealed to you, that really pulled on you. There was nothing you felt was epically important to do that so many other people think are very important. So let's look into it more closely. Now, in order to really grasp what an avatar is and what it means, you need to know certain things. The first thing you need to understand is, of course, that there's a spiritual realm beyond the material world. But I assume you're already open to that and you already know that, or you probably wouldn't even be watching. So there is a spiritual realm beyond the material. The next thing you need to understand is that Earth is not the only planet with intelligent life. And this is probably also something you're already accepting. I can remember being quite young when I realized that it didn't make any sense that Earth was the only planet. And I actually had the sense too that it didn't make any sense because the way the Earth is, it just couldn't be the only way a planet could be. So when you look at the entire universe, you go back to the Middle Ages, and they had this worldview that the Earth was a flat disk, and there was a dome above the Earth. And if you traveled up, you would hit that dome, and as you would go through it, there would be heaven, and God and the angels would be there, because the Earth was the center of the entire universe. Now, of course, we know we live in an enormous universe, and we can't even really imagine with our linear minds how huge it is. So you look at this universe, and it's obvious there are innumerable planets with intelligent life. And we can basically divide planets up into two categories. There is the kind of planet that Earth is. And this is what we can call an unnatural planet, because all of the things that are going on Earth, warfare, murder, torture, poverty, the way people treat each other, the insensitivity to life, this is not a natural condition. In other words, the Earth was not created in its current condition. It was turned into its current condition by the inhabitants of Earth, and that's something I'll return to. But just this shows you that the Earth is an unnatural planet. And when you look at the entire universe, there's only a very, very small number of unnatural planets in the universe. The vast majority of planets are natural planets. And a natural planet means basically that, well, if you want to make it really basic, it's where everybody follows the golden rule. But the reason they follow the golden rule is not because it's imposed upon them by some religion. It's because they have an intuitive sense that we are all connected. All life is connected. We are part of this whole. And when beings on a natural planet have this, there are things they naturally won't do it to each other. I mean, on Earth, you have this illusion that we are separate beings. And this gives rise to this really an unstated belief, but many people hold this belief that I can harm you, but it doesn't affect myself. And this is the basic illusion you see on an unnatural planet. On a natural planet, people can't believe in this illusion because they intuitively sense we're all connected, which means if I harm you, it's going to affect myself. I am part of the whole, and if any part of the whole is hurt, it affects me as part of that whole. So there are no things that are, none of these negative things that you see on Earth that are happening on a natural planet. A natural planet is in an upward spiral that's constantly growing. So in order to understand this a little deeper, we need to understand why planets are created. And I explain this in much more detail in, I have a series of videos about how the world works. And the first one, how the world was created, explains this in more detail. But I'll talk about it here a little bit, because it's important to understand that even the Earth was not created in its current state. So when a planet is created, it's created at a certain level. And what that means is that what we call matter, but which is really energy, it has a certain density. There's a certain base level of the density of matter on a planet. And then, of course, there's a specific design, how is the planet, the continents, the oceans, the different life forms. And all of this is created by the Ascended Masters, especially by masters called the Elohim, who define a certain planet. And then once the planet is created, which takes some time to manifest, then the first life streams will take embodiment in physical bodies on the planet. And these life streams are now given free will. And they have two basic options. They can either, let me backtrack, they start at a certain level, the new life streams that are embodied on a planet. And at that level, they have an intuitive sense that they are connected to something outside their own minds. They have some sense that they are connected to their higher selves and to their spiritual teachers, the Ascended Masters. They also have a sense they are connected to each other, and they have a sense of connection to the environment. They are not alien beings on a hostile planet. In other words, they don't see their environment as a hostile environment, because on the base level, when a new planet is created, it's almost like these old myths we have about a lost paradise where people had everything they needed available to them. But that's actually how it is on a natural planet. And that was how it was when Earth was created, because the Earth was originally created as a natural planet. So the one option that live streams have is they can expand their sense of connection, become more aware, consciously aware of their connection and what they can do. Because we are all created to be co-creators. So we have the ability in our minds to influence the environment we live in. In other words, the planet starts at a certain level, and our potential is that we can build on that level and make it more sophisticated than it originally was. So in other words, the Elohim, they don't create a finished planet, a perfect planet. They create a work in progress, and it's up to those who take embodiment to build onto that. And when people do that, when they co-create based on a sense of connection, then everything is raised up. Everything becomes better, more. There's more and more energy available. People have more and more creative powers. They can do almost anything they want, especially when they do it collectively and cooperate. So the natural thing on a natural planet is cooperation, because first a new being might explore its own individual creative abilities, but then it realizes we can create much more together, so people come together in groups and they create these advanced societies. Now the other option, of course, is that live streams can go into they can go below the level they were created at. So they go into this illusion that instead of being connected beings, they are separate beings. And I've talked in several of my videos about how this happens. You go into this duality consciousness. And you can basically say that on a natural planet, the co-creators that live on that planet, they are trying to discover the principles that the Elohim used when they created the planet. And obviously when you work with these principles, you can co-create much more. On an unnatural planet where live streams have gone into separation and duality, they're not trying to discover how the universe actually works. They are trying to define how they think it should work. And this means that they are out of touch with the reality of it, so they are working against the basic forces of the universe. And that's why what you see on Earth is that we have all this technology that's based on force. You are forcefully drilling oil out of the ground. You are putting it in an engine that explodes under high pressure. It's all force, force, force. It's like we think that nature is hostile to us and we have to take by force what we want. And that's how we have built modern technology. This is also why you see that modern technology is beginning to create some major problems that could threaten our survival as a race. This is force-based technology. But I don't want to go into that too much here, even though it's a very interesting topic. But so basically the idea is that on a planet like Earth, for a very long time, Earth functioned as a natural planet. And this means that the Earth was actually being raised above the ground level. But then there came, in the distant past, there came a turning point where now the majority of the beings, the life streams who embodied on Earth, they went into this consciousness of separation. And this started a downward spiral. And this is what has led to the current conditions where you see all of the selfishness, self-centeredness, the willingness to harm others if I can get an advantage for myself, instead of realizing that the more we do for others, the better things will be for ourselves. Now, the next thing you need to grasp here about the whole concept of avatars is that, as I said, there's a spiritual realm, and in that realm are spiritual beings. I call them ascended masters. They have, of course, over the course of history been called other things, gods, angels, whatever. But they are the beings who actually created the planet. And when a planet has been created, the inhabitants, they get free will. They have free will. When they see themselves as connected beings, they can expand their contact with their awareness of the ascended masters, who then serve as spiritual teachers for the beings on the planet. And therefore, they can help these beings explore their co-creative abilities, make better use of them, know the principles that work. Basically, you can say these principles that were used when a planet was created, they are aimed at making the planet sustainable. So when you work with the Ascended Masters and learn these principles, you're not only preserving the planet, but you are actually improving the planet. You are raising it to a higher and higher level. And naturally, the opposite, when you work against these principles, you create a self-destructive spiral that actually can lead to a planet destroying itself or being destroyed. And that has happened to a number of planets. So what happened was that the majority of the beings, let's call them human beings, that embodied in the past, they had gone into this separation. And as a result of going into separation, a lot of things were starting to break down in society and even in nature, like we see today with pollution and climate change and this and that. So the live streams at the time, they wondered, why are things breaking down? Why aren't they working as we know they used to? And they had to come up with an explanation. And the explanation they came up with was that the problem was diversity. That there were too many different people who had too many different beliefs and too many different ideas and wanted to do too many different things. In other words, over time there emerged a majority of people on the planet who decided our way of looking at life, our beliefs, our way of living is the only right one, and all the others are wrong. Now, this is the typical outcome of what I explained in my other videos about the duality consciousness, where you go into this epic mindset where you say something is absolutely right and everything else is wrong. So our way is the right way and the others are wrong. And so what emerged over time was this society that attempted to create uniformity. And this happened not necessarily with violence. There was no warfare on the planet at the time. But it happened by, from a very early time, indoctrinating children with this need to conform to society's standards and norms. So over time, there was created this very uniform society. The problem is that in order to create this uniformity, they also suppress creativity. And when you suppress creativity, that's when a society then begins to stagnate, and an entire civilization can stagnate, as we've even seen in recorded history. So that means the downward spiral of things breaking down actually becomes worse. People thought they were improving it by creating this uniformity, but they were just making it worse. Now, as I said, if you go up, if you expand your sense of connection, you can work with the Ascended Masters. But when you go down into separation, people are not working with the Ascended Masters anymore. In fact, they lose the awareness that they are Ascended Masters. They may still have an idea of gods, but not Ascended Masters that they can work with, that can help them understand the principles and even understand their own psychology. So these societies I'm talking about, they had no contact with the Ascended Masters, they had no awareness, which means the Ascended Masters couldn't work with these societies directly. In other words, the Ascended Master could see that if this current development continues, Earth is going to self-destruct. But they couldn't tell anybody this because they weren't open to hearing it. It's not dissimilar to today, where most mainstream religions and most political ideologies and scientific materialism are not open whatsoever to hearing that there are intelligent beings in a higher realm who could tell us how to overcome some of the problems we have. Who wants to listen to that in the mainstream? But there are some similarities, or some dissimilarities that I'll talk about later. So anyway, the Ascended Masters were facing this situation. If we don't do anything, then Earth is going to self-destruct. But the law of free will mandates that they couldn't really force these beings to acknowledge where they were heading. They couldn't force themselves upon the planet. But there was another option that they could use. And this is a little bit of a complicated issue because it requires you to understand what I have explained in my How the World Was Created video. That there were certain beings who rebelled against the co-creative process. In other words, they didn't want to expand their connection with their higher selves. They went into separation. And when you go into separation, the law of free will mandates that within very wide limits, you have to be allowed to go as far into separation as you can. Because the general process is that people can go so far into separation until they can't stand it anymore. And the reason why this is likely to happen is that when you go into separation, you are creating opposition to yourself. As I said, you're using force, and this creates a counterforce. It's action and reaction. It's also called karma. So there were beings, and I explained this in much more detail in the other videos. I'm just going to briefly summarize it here. There were beings who rebelled against this process. And they're what I call fallen beings because they fell into a lower state of consciousness. And in this sphere that we are in this world of form we are in, they originally incarnated on certain planets. But some of these planets were destroyed because they were still in this force-based mindset. And so there were a number of fallen beings who didn't really have a planet to incarnate on. And so the Ascended Masters decided that they would allow a certain number of fallen beings to incarnate on Earth. And the purpose for this was to break up this uniformity. And because the fallen beings they're complete egomaniacs, complete narcissists, and psychopaths. So they will not follow rules. They will not conform to anything in society. So they are guaranteed to break up any kind of uniform society. Also because, of course, they always want power. They always want control. And then the other thing is that the fallen beings are always divided. You know, in the duality consciousness, there are always two polarities. Right and wrong, good and evil, Christianity versus Islam, or communism versus capitalism. There are always these two polarities that emerge. And it's guaranteed that there's one fallen being will go into one polarity, the other will go into opposite polarity, and there you have a clash between them. So the fallen beings are always warring against each other. And so you could say, from a certain viewpoint, that why would the Ascended Masters come up with this idea? I mean, it seems crazy. Couldn't they risk that their fallen beings would destroy the planet? And yes, there was a risk that that could happen. But so why did the fallen beings, why did the Ascended Masters decide to let the fallen beings embody on the planet and take this risk? Well, the reason they did this was that it wasn't only fallen beings who embodied on Earth. There were also avatars who embodied on Earth. And avatars are beings who started out on a natural planet. We used our co-creative abilities to expand our sense of connection with our higher selves, with the Ascended Masters, and we basically went as far as we could go on the natural planet where we started out. So we are sort of at the point we could graduate from that planet. We had gone through a lot. We had increased our co-creative abilities, often our leadership abilities, our knowledge, our understanding, and so this means we had a certain spiritual attainment, and the Ascended Masters then asked for volunteers from these avatars who had, completed the cycle on their natural planets. And a number of us chose to embody on Earth to serve as a counterweight to the fallen beings. In other words, the Ascended Masters know that the fallen beings will pull down on Earth, but they will also break up the uniformity. They also know that the avatars will pull up on Earth, and we will actually also help break the uniformity because we know there's a better conditions, that there could be a better planet than what Earth currently is, or what it was when we descended. So we are also going to help break up uniformity and pull the Earth up. And so this is why this was allowed. So we as avatars actually chose to embody here to balance the fallen beings, which means that the original inhabitants of the Earth, they now had something they didn't have before. See, what happens when you have these uniform societies is that you actually lose any frame of reference that there's a different way to do things than the way you're doing them, because you think this is the only way or the only right way to do things. So you don't really have any frame of reference that there's something else. So here come the fallen beings, and they want control, and they're fighting with each other. So they give the inhabitants of the earth, human beings, a frame of reference. There's a different way to do things. There's not a positive way, but it's a different way. And here come the avatars, and we have a positive approach, and we are saying, no, but there's another different way of doing things, a better way of doing things. Earth doesn't have to be the way it is. So the original inhabitants of Earth, they had a choice between the two. Basically, who would they follow? The fallen beings taking the Earth down, or the avatars taking the Earth up? And the reason why this is important is that it's still the original inhabitants that determine whether the Earth is going to go down or up. They are the ones who have, by the law of free will, the responsibility to choose for Earth. We as avatars can't do it for them, and the fallen beings can't either. So it's a matter of who pulls. Do the fallen beings pull the Earth down? Do the avatars pull the Earth up? And so this happened a long time ago. I won't even talk about numbers because it's beyond what most people can accept, but it's a long time ago. And so there has been some ups and downs, even before what we call recorded history, where sometimes the fallen beings would take society down, and often the population would go down, and then there would be a period of going up again. But what has happened in the last several thousand years, especially the last 2,000 years since Jesus embodied, is that the Earth has been in an upward trend. There's been an upward spiral that has been created on Earth. And you may look at what's going on Earth and think, well, how can that be? Things seem to be getting worse. But I've actually explained that in another video about, is the world getting worse or better? Because it's simply that things are becoming more pronounced, more extreme, so people can see and they can choose. Do we want the lower option or the higher option? Because the difference is becoming clearer. So anyway, the Earth is in an upward trend, and that is one of the reasons why it's important for us as avatars to become aware of who we are and why we're here. Because by becoming aware of this, we can have more of a positive impact on pulling the Earth up. And this is something I'll talk more about later because it's a bigger topic. But so basically, this is the dynamic that's happening on Earth. We have the original inhabitants, human beings, that are not really at this point, all of them, strong enough to decide really what they want to do. They often want to follow somebody. So the question is, do they follow the fallen beings in a downward trend, or do they follow avatars in an upward trend? And many people have, of course, over time, followed the avatars. There are many of the human beings, the original inhabitants, that are in an upward spiral. They are raising their consciousness. And many of them are also interested in the spiritual path. So it isn't just avatars that are spiritual. So basically what we see is that there has been this decisive shift, and it started long before, but the Buddha accelerated it 2,500 years ago, and Jesus accelerated it 2,000 years ago. You're probably aware, if you're spiritually interested, that there's the talk about these spiritual cycles or ages. So there's the age of Pisces, there's the age of Aquarius. And basically the last 2,000 years was the age of Pisces. And Jesus was the one who was meant to be the archetype for the age of Pisces. He is an avatar, and he had been embodied many lifetimes before on Earth, but he was in his last embodiment, and therefore he was chosen to set the example. So you may have grown up in a Christian culture and been very suspicious of Christianity and felt there was something wrong with it. And what is the basic thing that's wrong with Christianity is that they made Jesus the only Son of God. In other words, he was the exception. In reality, he was meant to be an example of the potential we all have of raising our consciousness and achieving the same state of consciousness that he demonstrated, the Christ consciousness. And this is especially a potential for avatars, but of course, the original inhabitants can also do it. So the idea was that at the end of the Piscean age, at least 10,000 people would have achieved Christ consciousness personal Christhood. And millions or more would have moved quite up high towards that goal. And this is still a potential that can come about, because there are 10,000 people in embodiment who in this lifetime could manifest the fullness of their Christhood, which is why Jesus has given a lot of teachings about this. You can find them on the website askrealjesus.com. But let's just go back to the general overview here. So what we are doing now is the planet is moving into the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is a new cycle. And it's overseen by an ascended master called Saint Germain. And he has plans to manifest a golden age in this cycle. And that means that the Earth will move closer to becoming a natural planet. There will be a lot of new technology that will be released. A lot of technology that isn't force-based, so therefore it doesn't pollute. Just imagine that you had unlimited energy that couldn't be monopolized by huge corporations, and that didn't pollute and actually didn't require us to dig up resources from the ground in order to produce it. So this is the kind of vision that Saint Germain has, and many avatars are, of course, we are an embodiment to help make that vision a reality. So many avatars feel an intuitive connection to Saint Germain. They feel intuitively that there is reality to this, that we are moving into a better age, that there's a huge potential for progress. And if you are an avatar, it's important to recognize that, because I can see in myself and other people I know that we, as avatars, we can have a tendency to become a little bit negative, because we look at the Earth and we see, oh, there's so much wrong here, there's so much that needs to change, and people aren't willing to change, so how is it ever going to change? But the reality is it can change, and it can change quickly, but we can't do it on our own. We can't do it of our own power. That's why Jesus said, I can of my own self do nothing. The only way we can have the impact we want to have, and we came to have as avatars, is by working with the Ascended Masters. We cannot do it of our own power. So these are important topics to consider, because once you realize that you are an avatar, you also realize you have a life plan. You have a divine plan that you made before you came into this embodiment. And it specifies what growth you wanted to go through spiritually, how high of a level of consciousness you wanted to reach in this lifetime. But it also specifies what you want to do, what positive impact you want to have on society. And this is something you can sense intuitively. And by realizing that you are an avatar and starting to work with this, and especially starting to work with the psychology and your reaction to it, you can much more quickly come to a point where you get clarity about what is your divine plan, what is your life plan. And this is not something that was forced upon you. This is something you chose in cooperation with the Ascended Masters, because if you are an avatar, you worked with the Ascended Masters before you came into embodiment. And by becoming consciously aware of the Ascended Masters and their existence, then you can more quickly tune in to what did you put in your divine plan. And the Ascended Masters can help you do this. So that's why it's important to consider these. So what I have done here is I've just given you a basic overview of the dynamic on Earth. But what I'll start doing in the following videos is I'll talk specifically about the psychology we have as avatars, and how knowing this and working with certain tools can help you resolve this psychology. Because, as I said, we have a tendency sometimes to become a little negative or hopeless about Earth, because you think about it, we came from a natural planet where there is none of the negatives that you find on Earth. So here we come to Earth in our first embodiment, and now we experience on our own four lower bodies the density of Earth, the enormous insensitivity, all these things that are going on. And it is a huge shock for us. And this is what I'll talk about in my next video. The shock that all avatars went through when we first came to Earth, and how we reacted to that, and how the way we reacted when we first came to Earth has set a pattern that colors everything we have done ever since. The way we act, the way we look at Earth, the way we look at ourselves on Earth has been colored by this shock, this trauma. The Ascended Masters call it the cosmic burst trauma that we went through when we first came to Earth. And I'll explain how that happened, why this trauma came about, and of course what we can do about it. So I hope you'll join me for the next video as well.